You will dirty my hands, Penelope Worthington snapped, her eyes barely grazing Amarania before turning away, dismissing the black woman's outstretched hand with a sneer. In that charged moment, captured on camera, a $4 billion deal hung in the balance. Welcome, story lovers. Where are you tuning in from? Drop your city below and let us know. What do you think happens when arrogance meets silent power? Imara, a brilliant economist and the anonymous force behind a transformative energy project, withdrew her $4 billion commitment just 24 hours later, unraveling Penelope's empire. Why did she walk away? What secrets did that handshake hold? Subscribe to our channel for the latest gripping stories and join our global audience. Share where you're watching from. Your guesses might not prepare you for the twist in this tale of respect and retribution. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a crown of steel and glass, its spires piercing a cloudless sky as the city hummed with the pulse of ambition. Inside the penthouse conference room of Worthington Tower, a cathedral of modern wealth, the air was thick with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over linen-draped tables, where flutes of champagne sparkled beside plates of artfully arranged canapes. The room buzzed with the low murmur of power executives in bespoke suits, their laughter polished, their gestures calculated. This was no ordinary brunch. It was a celebration of a $4 billion infrastructure deal, a bold venture to bring sustainable energy to three underserved states, a project poised to reshape industries and etch names into history. At the heart of it all, though unseen by most, stood Imarania, a woman whose quiet presence carried the weight of empires. Imara stepped into the room, her emerald green blazer a vibrant contrast to the muted grays and blues of the corporate elite. Her posture was erect, her movements deliberate, exuding a confidence honed by years of navigating spaces where she was often underestimated. A PhD in economics from Stanford adorned her resume, but it was her silent influence that defined her. She had transformed entire sectors, healthcare, tech, renewable energy, with strategic investments, never seeking the spotlight. Her latest triumph was this deal, a vision she'd backed anonymously, funneling $4 billion through discreet channels to ensure its success. Imara didn't crave board seats or headlines. She wanted results. Her role was known only to a select few, a whispered secret among the deal's architects. Today, she had agreed to step out of the shadows, if only briefly, to meet the face of the project. Penelope Worthington. Penelope, the CEO of Worthington Construction, was a study in calculated charm. Her blonde bob gleamed under the lights, her tailored cream suit a nod to her old money lineage. She moved through the crowd like a queen holding court, her laughter bright, her handshake firm for the right people. Worthington Construction, a titan of industry built by her grandfather, was synonymous with prestige, its name etched on skyscrapers and bridges across the nation. Penelope had inherited not just the company, but its aura of invincibility, amplified by her media savvy. She was the darling of business magazines, her face plastered across covers with headlines like "Visionary of the Future." This deal was her crown jewel, a chance to cement her legacy as a trailblazer. Yet beneath the polish, there was an edge, a flicker of arrogance that dismissed those she deemed beneath her notice. Imara observed from a distance, her dark eyes scanning the room. She noted the way Penelope's smile tightened when addressing certain guests, the subtle tilt of her head that signaled disinterest. Imara had seen this before. Power wielded carelessly, assumptions made in a glance. She sipped her sparkling water, her mind cataloging every detail, the clink of glasses, the forced laughter, the way the room orbited Penelope like planets around a sun. Imara had no intention of joining that orbit. She was here for one reason: to gauge the woman entrusted with her investment. The deal was more than a business transaction to her. It was a lifeline for communities long overlooked, a chance to bring clean energy to places where power outages were a way of life. Imara had chosen this project for its impact, not its glamour. The brunch was a carefully choreographed affair, every detail designed to impress. Waiters glided silently, refilling glasses before they emptied. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their notes weaving through conversations about stock prices and political connections. Executives clustered in small groups, their voices low as they discussed the deal's potential to reshape the energy sector. The project promised solar farms, wind turbines, and a grid robust enough to withstand the harshest storms. It was a vision of progress, and Imara's capital was its backbone. She had spent months in private meetings, analyzing data, ensuring every dollar would serve the greater good. Her anonymity was deliberate. She preferred to let the work speak for itself. As the room filled, Imara felt the weight of eyes on her. Some were curious, others dismissive, unsure why she was there. A few recognized her name, their eyebrows lifting in brief acknowledgement before they turned away. She was used to this, the subtle dance of being seen yet unseen. Her hair coiled elegantly atop her head, and her understated gold earrings spoke of refinement. But it was her presence that commanded attention, a quiet authority that needed no fanfare. She stood near a window, the city sprawling below, and allowed herself a moment to imagine the impact of her investment. Families with reliable power, schools lit at night, businesses thriving. This was why she had agreed to attend, to see the machine she'd set in motion. Penelope, meanwhile, was in her element. She flitted from group to group, her voice carrying over the crowd as she recounted the deal's origins, conveniently framing it as her brainchild. Imara watched, her expression unreadable. She knew the truth. Penelope's firm was a partner, not the visionary. The real vision had come from Imara's meticulous planning, her belief in a future where equity and innovation could coexist. As the brunch neared its peak, Imara decided it was time. She set down her glass and moved toward Penelope, her steps measured, her hand ready to extend in a gesture of partnership. The room seemed to slow, the chatter fading into a distant hum. This was the moment where two worlds would meet, one of silent power, the other of brazen ambition. What happened next would set the stage for everything to come. The penthouse conference room pulsed with the rhythm of power, a symphony of clinking glasses and murmured deals. The air was fragrant with notes of citrus and rosemary from the catered spread, but beneath the elegance lay a current of tension, as if the room itself sensed the collision to come. Imara Nia stood poised near the center of the crowd, her emerald green blazer catching the light like a beacon. Her heart beat steadily, her mind sharp as she prepared to bridge the gap between her silent influence and the public face of the $4 billion energy project. She had chosen this moment to meet Penelope Worthington, the CEO whose name adorned the deal like a crown. Imara's outstretched hand was more than a gesture. It was an offering of partnership, a quiet assertion of her place in this venture. But what followed would ignite a fire that no one, least of all Penelope, could have foreseen. Penelope stood a few feet away, her blonde bob gleaming under the chandeliers, her cream suit a pristine canvas for her calculated charm. She was mid-conversation with two executives, both white men in navy suits, their laughter loud and performative. Her eyes sparkled with the ease of someone who thrived in the spotlight, her gestures expansive as she recounted a recent triumph. The men hung on her every word, their nods eager, their hands clasped in hers with the familiarity of old allies. Imara approached, her steps measured, her smile warm but restrained. She stopped just close enough to be noticed, her hand extended in a gesture as natural as breathing. "Ms. Worthington," she said, her voice clear, steady, carrying the weight of her authority without demanding it. Penelope's head turned, her gaze landing on Imara, like a blade slicing through fog. Her eyes, sharp and blue, swept over Imara, her coiled hair, her tailored blazer, the quiet confidence in her stance. For a fleeting second, something flickered in Penelope's expression. Disinterest, perhaps, or something colder. Then, with a twist of her lips that barely qualified as a smile, she spoke. "Look, I don't have time for this," she said, her voice clipped, the words slicing through the air like a whip. Without breaking stride, she turned her back, her hand darting out to clasp the arm of the man beside her, her laughter resuming as if Imara were a ghost, invisible and irrelevant. The room seemed to hold its breath. The string quartet's notes faltered, or perhaps it only felt that way to those who witnessed the moment. Executives nearby froze, their champagne flutes hovering mid-sip. A woman in a red dress glanced at her colleague, her eyebrows arching in silent shock. A man in a pinstripe suit coughed into his fist, his eyes darting to the floor. The camera, discreetly positioned to capture the brunch for promotional footage, whirred softly, its lens trained on the scene. Imara stood still, her hand suspended for a heartbeat before she lowered it, her fingers curling gently at her side. Her face remained a mask of composure, her eyes dark and unreadable. But inside, a storm was brewing, not of anger, but of clarity. She had seen this before, the casual dismissal, the assumption that her presence was incidental. But this was different. This was not a slight to be brushed off. It was a crack in the foundation of a $4 billion dream. Imara's mind, honed by years of strategic calculation, began to map the consequences. She noted the faces of those who had seen, the board member in the corner, his jaw tight, the junior executive who met her gaze before looking away, the waiter who paused, tray in hand, his expression unreadable. The room, for all its wealth and polish, was a stage, and Penelope had just played her part in a drama she didn't yet understand. Penelope, oblivious, continued her orbit through the crowd. Her laughter rang out, sharp and bright, as she leaned into another conversation, her hand grazing the shoulder of a silver-haired investor. She was in her element, the queen of this gilded world, unaware that the footage now etched in digital memory would soon escape the room's confines. Imara stepped back, her movements deliberate, blending into the crowd as effortlessly as she had entered. She retrieved her sparkling water from a nearby table, her fingers cool against the glass, and took a sip. The act was mundane, but her mind was anything but. She was already thinking 3 moves ahead, her years as an economist teaching her that every action had a cost, every slight a consequence. The executives around her resumed their chatter, but the air had shifted. Whispers began to snake through the crowd, soft at first, like ripples on a still lake. "Did you see that?" a woman murmured to her colleague, her voice low. "She didn't even acknowledge her." Another man, adjusting his tie, leaned closer to his partner. "Who was that woman? She didn't look like staff." The questions hung unanswered, their weight growing with each passing second. Imara, unnoticed now, observed it all. She saw the discomfort in their glances, the way they avoided her eyes as if her presence was a reminder of something they'd rather forget. She didn't linger. With a final glance at Penelope, who was now posing for a photo with a group of investors, Imara made her way to the edge of the room. The city sprawled below, a tapestry of ambition and struggle, and she felt a quiet resolve settle in her chest. This was not about a handshake, it was about respect, about power unrecognized. Imara knew her worth, and she knew the power of her $4 billion commitment. As she slipped toward the exit, her heels silent on the polished floor, she carried with her a truth Penelope would soon learn. The most dangerous force is the one you underestimate. The camera, still rolling, captured her departure, a fleeting figure in green, leaving behind a room that would never be the same. The elevator doors slid shut with a whisper, sealing Imara Nia away from the glittering chaos of the penthouse brunch. The hum of the descent was a stark contrast to the clamor she'd left behind. A moment of solitude that allowed her thoughts to crystallize. Her reflection stared back from the polished steel walls, her emerald green blazer vibrant against the muted tones, her expression calm but resolute. The snub from Penelope Worthington still lingered, not as a wound but as a spark, igniting a fire of purpose. Imara's hand rested lightly on the railing, her fingers steady, but her mind was a whirlwind of strategy, each thought a chess move in a game Penelope didn't even know she was playing. Imara wasn't angry. She was deliberate, her years as an economist and silent power broker, teaching her that true strength lay in precision, not emotion. Back in her downtown office, a sleek space lined with bookshelves and a single window overlooking the city's pulse, Imara settled at her desk. The room was a sanctuary of focus, free of ostentation, its walls adorned with framed articles about the industries she'd reshaped: healthcare, tech, renewable energy, all without ever stepping into the spotlight. Her laptop glowed to life, casting a soft light across her face as she opened the contract for the $4 billion energy project. Her eyes scanned the document, zeroing in on a clause she'd insisted on during negotiations. The primary investor could withdraw funding within 24 hours without penalty, a safeguard born of her instinct to protect her vision. It was a clause few had noticed, buried in legalese. But to Amara, it was a sword sheathed in velvet. She leaned back, her fingers steepled, and let the moment of Penelope's dismissal replay in her mind. The CEO's curt words, "Look, I don't have time for this." And the cold turn of her shoulder were not just personal slights. They were symptoms of a deeper arrogance, a disregard for the unseen forces that held her empire aloft. Amara knew the weight of her $4 billion commitment, the lifeblood it provided to a project that promised clean energy to communities long neglected. She had chosen this deal for its potential to transform lives, not to stroke egos. But Penelope's actions had cast a shadow over that vision, a shadow Amara could not ignore. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from her trusted advisor, Malik, who had been at the brunch. "The footage is circulating," he wrote. "People are talking." Imara's lips curved into a faint smile. She didn't need to see the clips to know their impact. The camera had captured Penelope's snub in unforgiving detail, and the internet was a merciless amplifier. She opened her laptop's browser, not to check social media, but to review her notes on the project's stakeholders. Names, roles, and motivations scrolled past, each a piece in the puzzle she was assembling. The board members, the secondary investors, the community leaders who had trusted her to deliver, they all deserved better than a leader who dismissed power she couldn't see. Imara's office was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city beyond the window. She poured herself a cup of tea, the steam curling upward like a whispered promise. Her mind was a map of possibilities, each path leading to the same destination: accountability. She wasn't driven by vengeance. She was driven by principle. The project was her legacy, a beacon of equity in a world that often forgot the marginalized. Penelope's disregard threatened that legacy, not just for Amara, but for the communities counting on the energy grid's promise. The clause in the contract was her leverage, a silent weapon she could wield without fanfare. She began drafting an email to the board, her fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. The words were measured, professional, but their intent was unmistakable. "Due to executive misconduct and unacceptable treatment of key personnel, I am considering withdrawing my $4 billion commitment." She paused, her cursor blinking, and added, "A final decision will be made within the 24-hour window." It was a warning, not a bluff, and Amara knew its weight. She saved the draft, her eyes flicking to a photo on her desk, a faded image of her grandmother, a woman who had taught her that power didn't need to shout to be heard. Outside, the city churned, unaware of the seismic shift brewing in this quiet office. Amara stood and walked to the window, her reflection merging with the skyline. She thought of the families who would benefit from the project, children studying by reliable light, businesses thriving without fear of outages. This was why she had invested, why she had chosen anonymity over acclaim. But anonymity didn't mean weakness. Penelope had mistaken her silence for insignificance, a miscalculation that would soon unravel her carefully curated world. Amara returned to her desk, her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. She opened a spreadsheet, tracking the project's financial dependencies, her mind already mapping the fallout of a potential withdrawal. The numbers were stark. Without her $4 billion, the project would stall, and Penelope's firm would face a reckoning. Amara didn't relish the chaos, but she understood its necessity. Respect was not optional, not when lives and legacies were at stake. She closed her laptop, the screen fading to black, and leaned back in her chair. The city's lights twinkled below, a reminder of the power she held, not in her voice, but in her choices. The clock was ticking, and Amara Nia was ready to make her move. The city thrummed beyond Amara Nia's office window, its pulse a distant echo as she sat in the stillness of her decision. The draft email to the board rested on her laptop screen, its words a quiet ultimatum that could topple an empire. The brunch snub, now hours past, had set a spark to kindling, and the first tendrils of smoke were rising. Amara sipped her tea, the porcelain warm against her fingers, her mind a calm sea amidst the brewing storm. She did not need to chase the chaos. She knew it would find its momentum. The footage of Penelope Worthington's dismissal, captured in crisp detail by the brunch's promotional camera, was already slipping beyond the penthouse walls, carried by the invisible currents of the digital age. In the gilded corridors of Worthington Tower, the air was different, heavy with the weight of unspoken questions. The legal team huddled in a glass-walled office, their voices low, their laptops open to the contract that held the $4 billion deal together. A junior attorney, her brow furrowed, pointed to a clause buried in the fine print. The primary investor could withdraw funding within 24 hours without penalty. "Who even insisted on this?" she murmured, her colleague glancing up with a frown. "Doesn't matter," he replied, his voice tight. "If it's triggered, we're done." The clause was a landmine, unnoticed until now, and the team's unease grew as they realized its implications. They didn't know Imara's name, not yet, but they felt the shadow of her power. Across the city, the brunch footage was taking on a life of its own. A junior executive, still rattled by what he'd witnessed, had shared the clip with a friend, who posted it online with a caption that cut like a blade. "This is how CEOs treat people they don't think matter." The post spread like wildfire, retweeted by thousands, its comments a cascade of outrage and speculation. "Who was that woman in the green blazer?" one user demanded. "Did Penelope even know she was snubbing a VIP?" another wrote. The clip showed it all. Imara's outstretched hand, Penelope's cold dismissal, the words, "Look, I don't have time for this," slicing through the air. The internet, ever hungry for a scandal, devoured it. Imara's phone buzzed again, a new message from Malik lighting up the screen. "It's everywhere. They're calling it a disgrace." She didn't open the social media apps. She didn't need to. She could feel the tide turning, the whispers growing into a roar. Instead, she opened a file on her laptop, a detailed breakdown of the project's stakeholders. She traced the names with her eyes: board members who valued results over egos, community leaders who trusted her vision, secondary investors who followed her lead. They were her silent army, and she knew they would listen when she spoke. But for now, she waited, letting the ripples of the snub spread. In a trendy cafe downtown, a group of young professionals huddled over their phones, the clip playing on a loop. "She didn't even look at her," one said, shaking her head. "It's not just rude, it's arrogant." Her friend, scrolling through comments, nodded. "People are saying the woman in green might be a big player. Someone's digging into it." The conversation mirrored thousands of others, each adding fuel to the growing fire. The hashtag Joshua Worthington snub began to trend, its reach stretching far beyond the city. Imara's anonymity, once her shield, was now a mystery that captivated the masses. Back at Worthington Tower, the legal team's murmurs reached the ears of a senior board member, Clara Henshaw, who had been at the brunch. She'd seen the snub, her jaw tightening as Penelope turned away from Imara. Clara sat in her office now, her phone buzzing with notifications from colleagues and industry contacts. "Have you seen the footage?" one message read. "This could tank us." Clara's fingers hovered over her keyboard, her mind racing. She didn't know Imara's role, but she knew enough to sense trouble. She fired off an email to the legal team. "Find out who that woman was, now." Imara, in her office, felt the city's pulse quicken. She stood and walked to the window, the skyline a mosaic of ambition and struggle. Her draft email to the board was ready, but she wasn't yet. She wanted the whispers to grow, the pressure to build. The project was her legacy, a promise of clean energy for communities that had been overlooked for too long. Penelope's arrogance had threatened that promise, and Imara would not let it stand. She returned to her desk, her tea now cool, and opened a new tab to monitor the project's financial dependencies. The numbers were clear. Her $4 billion was the cornerstone, and without it, the deal would crumble. The city churned below, its energy feeding the storm. Imara's silence was her strength, a force that needed no spotlight to shine. The whispers of change were no longer. They were a chorus, growing louder with every share, every comment, every question about the woman in the green blazer. Imara knew the power of waiting, of letting the world catch up to her. The clock ticked on, and the stage was set for her next move. The city's pulse thrummed through the night, a restless heartbeat that echoed in the quiet of Imarania's office. The glow of her laptop screen cast sharp shadows across her desk, illuminating the email she had drafted hours earlier. Its words were a guillotine, poised to fall. "Due to executive misconduct and unacceptable treatment of key personnel, I am withdrawing my $4 billion commitment, effective immediately. Imara's finger hovered over the send button, her breath steady, her resolve a steel thread woven through her core. The snub at the brunch, Penelope Worthington's cold dismissal, had crystallized into this moment, a reckoning not born of spite but of principle. The $4 billion energy project, her vision for equitable progress, demanded respect, and Imara was about to remind the world of its cost. She leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking softly, and glanced at the city beyond her window. The skyline glittered, oblivious to the seismic shift she was about to unleash. The social media storm had grown into a tempest, the hashtag Jari Worthington snub trending across platforms, the brunch footage replayed in endless loops. Comments poured in, dissecting Penelope's arrogance, speculating about the woman in the green blazer. "She's someone important," one post declared. "Bet she's the money behind this deal," another guessed. Imara didn't read them. She didn't need to. The world was doing her work, amplifying the consequences of Penelope's misstep. But Imara's power lay not in the noise of the crowd, but in the quiet precision of her actions. Her phone buzzed, a message from Malik. "Board's getting nervous. They know something's up." Imara's lips curved faintly. She had anticipated this. The legal team's discovery of the withdrawal clause had sent ripples through Worthington Tower, and now the board was scrambling, their confidence shaken by whispers they couldn't yet name. Imara opened her laptop's file on the project's financials, her eyes scanning the numbers that told a stark truth. Her $4 billion was the cornerstone, the lifeblood that kept the deal alive. Without it, the solar farms, wind turbines, and community grids would remain dreams, unbuilt and unrealized. She had poured her heart into this project, not for glory, but for the families who deserved light, the businesses that needed stability. Penelope's disregard had threatened that legacy, and Imara would not let it stand. She returned to the email, her fingers steady as she finalized the text. No embellishments, no accusations, just facts, sharp and unyielding. "The project's integrity depends on mutual respect," she added, a nod to the communities she served. Then with a single click, she sent it. The email winged its way to the board, a silent missile that would detonate in their inboxes. Imara leaned back, her tea long cold, and felt a quiet satisfaction settle in her chest. She had acted not out of anger, but out of duty, to her vision, to the people who trusted her, to the principle that power, no matter how silent, demanded acknowledgement. At Worthington Tower, the boardroom was a hive of agitation. Clara Henshaw, the senior board member who had witnessed the snub, sat at the head of the table, her phone buzzing with alerts. The legal team had confirmed the clause's existence, and now the board was piecing together the puzzle. "Who is this investor?" a director demanded, his voice sharp. "Why weren't we told?" Clara's eyes narrowed. "We didn't ask," she said, her tone heavy with regret. The email from Imara landed moments later, its subject line stark. "Withdrawal of commitment." Clara opened it, her breath catching as she read the words. The room fell silent, the weight of $4 billion evaporating like mist in the sun. Outside, the city churned, its digital veins pulsing with outrage. The brunch footage had spread to news outlets, pundits dissecting Penelope's behavior on evening broadcasts. "A blatant display of arrogance," one commentator said. "Who was that woman?" another pressed, the question echoing across screens. The stock market, ever sensitive to whispers of instability, reacted swiftly. Worthington Construction's shares dipped, a slow bleed that hinted at worse to come. Investors, alerted by the viral storm, began to question their stakes, their calls flooding the firm's lines. The boardroom's polished veneer cracked under the pressure, its members exchanging glances that spoke of panic and blame. Imara in her office remained untouched by the chaos. She opened a new file, a list of alternative firms she had vetted months ago, companies with inclusive practices aligned with her vision. Her $4 billion would not lie dormant. It would find a home where respect was a given, not a gamble. She made a call to a contact at one such firm, her voice calm but firm. "We need to talk," she said, the words carrying the weight of possibility. The city's lights twinkled below, a reminder of the lives her investment could touch. Imara's power was not in the noise she made, but in the choices she wielded, each one a step toward justice. The board, unaware of her next move, grappled with the fallout. Clara forwarded Imara's email to the legal team, her hands trembling. "Find her," she ordered. "We need to know who we're dealing with." But Imara was already beyond their reach, her decision final, her silence a force that would reshape the project's future. The clock ticked on, the 24-hour window closing, and the world waited for the consequences to unfold. The boardroom at Worthington Tower was a mausoleum of polished wood and strained silence, its air thick with the acrid scent of panic. Morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the executives gathered around the long mahogany table. Penelope Worthington sat at its head, her cream suit pristine, but her composure fraying at the edges. Her fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the table, her blue eyes darting to the door as if expecting salvation to walk through. The viral storm over her snub of Imara Nia had reached a fever pitch, and now Imara's email, its words a guillotine blade, had landed in their inboxes, announcing the withdrawal of her $4 billion commitment. The board was a powder keg, and the truth was about to light the fuse. Clara Henshaw, the senior board member, stood at the far end, her posture rigid, her tablet clutched like a shield. She had read Imara's email aloud moments ago, her voice steady but laced with dread. "Due to executive misconduct and unacceptable treatment of key personnel, I am withdrawing my $4 billion commitment, effective immediately." The words hung in the air, heavy as lead, each syllable a nail in the coffin of Penelope's empire. The directors exchanged glances, their faces a gallery of shock and calculation. A junior executive, his tie loosened, broke the silence. "Who is this investor?" he demanded, his voice sharp with desperation. Clara's eyes flicked to Penelope, who sat frozen, her usual charisma replaced by a pallor that betrayed her fear. "Her name is Imara Nia," Clara said, her tone cutting through the room's haze. "The woman in the green blazer you dismissed at the brunch." A murmur rippled through the board, heads turning toward Penelope, whose fingers stilled on the table. Her lips parted, but no words came. The footage, now a global sensation, replayed in her mind. The outstretched hand, her own curt, "Look, I don't have time for this," the turn of her shoulder. She had seen only a black woman in a suit, not a titan of industry, not the silent force behind their $4 billion dream. "How was I supposed to know?" she finally stammered, her voice cracking, a fragile defense against the weight of her mistake. Clara's gaze hardened. "You didn't ask," she said, her words a quiet indictment. "You didn't care to." The boardroom fell silent again, the truth settling like dust after an explosion. Imara Nia, a PhD economist with a track record of reshaping industries, had been their invisible backbone. Her $4 billion was the lifeblood of the energy project. She had chosen anonymity, not out of weakness, but to let the work speak. Solar farms, wind turbines, grids for communities long forgotten. Penelope's arrogance had blinded her to the power standing before her, and now that power had struck. A financial officer, his face ashen, scrolled through his laptop, projecting a graph onto the wall. Worthington Construction's stock had plummeted further, a jagged red line tracing the fallout of Imara's withdrawal. "We're hemorrhaging," he said, his voice low. "Secondary investors are calling, asking if they should pull out." The room's tension spiked, eyes darting to Penelope, who sat like a statue, her hands now clasped tightly in her lap. A board member leaned forward, his voice urgent. "She was the primary backer, and no one told us?" Clara shook her head. "She didn't want the spotlight. We respected that, until now." Penelope's mind raced, replaying every moment of the brunch. She had shaken hands with men she deemed important, laughed at their jokes, and curated her image for the cameras. Imara's presence had registered only as an inconvenience, a distraction from her carefully choreographed performance. Now the world was watching, not her triumph, but her failure. Social media, relentless and unforgiving, had turned her snub into a symbol of hubris. W. Worthington, snub, trended alongside comments like, "She ignored the wrong woman," and "Who's running the show?" The boardroom's silence was deafening, each member grappling with the reality that their future hung on the decision of a woman they had barely acknowledged. Clara set her tablet down, her voice steady but fierce. Nia built this deal from the shadows. She chose us because she believed in the project's impact, not your name, Penelope. The word stung, and Penelope's face tightened, her jaw clenched. She wanted to protest, to claim ignorance as a shield, but the truth was merciless. She had judged Imara by her appearance, not her power, and that miscalculation had cost them everything. The boardroom's windows framed a city that seemed to mock them, its skyline indifferent to their unraveling. A junior director spoke, his voice tentative. "Can we fix this? Reach out to her?" Clara's eyes softened, but only slightly. "She's made her decision," she said, "and Nia doesn't act without purpose." The board sat in stunned silence, the weight of their oversight crushing. Penelope's empire, built on charisma and connections, was crumbling, and the revelation of Imara's power was the final blow. The room held its breath, waiting for a miracle that wouldn't come. The boardroom at Worthington Tower was a battlefield, its polished surfaces reflecting the chaos that had erupted in the wake of Nia's withdrawal. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and desperation, the morning light now harsh, exposing every crease of worry on the faces of the executives. Penelope Worthington sat at the head of the table, her cream suit no longer a symbol of authority, but a stark reminder of her unraveling. Her hands, once confident, now gripped the arms of her chair, knuckles pale. The revelation of Imara's identity as the $4 billion backer had shattered the room's fragile equilibrium, and the fallout was spreading like wildfire, threatening to consume everything Penelope had built. Clara Henshaw, the senior board member, paced near the windows, her tablet buzzing with notifications that painted a grim picture. Worthington Construction stock had plummeted further, a digital hemorrhage that flickered on the wall-mounted screen. The graph's red line was a jagged scar, each dip a testament to the market's loss of faith. "We're down 12% since the open," the financial officer said, his voice hollow, "and it's not stopping." Phones vibrated incessantly, their screens flashing with calls from investors, partners, and media outlets hungry for a statement. The viral footage of Penelope's snub had ignited a global firestorm, with Imara Worthington snub trending alongside scathing headlines. CEO's arrogance costs billions, and who was the woman she ignored? Penelope's PR team, huddled in a corner office, scrambled to contain the damage. A young publicist, her eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness, drafted apologies that felt hollow even as she typed. "Ms. Worthington regrets any misunderstanding," one statement began, but the words crumbled under the weight of public outrage. Social media was a relentless judge, with users posting memes of Penelope's dismissive turn, her words, "Look, I don't have time for this," looping in videos that racked up millions of views. "She didn't just snub her," one comment read, "she snubbed the future." Another demanded, "Where's Nia now?" The world was clamoring for answers, and Penelope had none. In the boardroom, the directors were a chorus of discord. A silver-haired investor slammed his fist on the table. "How did we not know who she was?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the walls. Clara stopped pacing, her eyes cold. "We didn't ask," she said, repeating her earlier indictment. "We trusted Penelope to represent us, and she failed." The words landed like a slap, and Penelope's jaw tightened, her gaze dropping to the table. She wanted to argue, to claim she couldn't have known Imara's role, but the truth was undeniable. Her arrogance had blinded her, and now the consequences were cascading. Secondary investors were circling, their confidence shaken by Imara's withdrawal. A major stakeholder, a renewable energy conglomerate, sent a curt email. "We're reviewing our commitment in light of recent events." The boardroom buzzed with the implications. Without Imara's $4 billion, and with others pulling back, the energy project was a house of cards in a windstorm. Community leaders, who had pinned their hopes on the solar farms and wind turbines, began to voice their concerns on public forums, their trust eroding. "This was supposed to be for us," one wrote, "not for some CEO's ego." The project's noble vision, clean energy for the underserved, was unraveling, and Penelope was at its center. She stood, her voice trembling as she tried to reclaim control. "We can salvage this," she said, her tone more plea than command. We'll reach out to her, offer an apology, and renegotiate. But the board's faces told a different story. Skepticism, anger, resignation. Clara shook her head. Imarania doesn't negotiate with disrespect, she said. You saw her email. She's done. The room fell silent, the weight of finality settling like dust. Penelope sank back into her chair, her empire crumbling in real time. The city beyond the windows seemed to mock her, its skyline a reminder of the legacy she had squandered. The PR team pushed a statement to the press, a feeble attempt at damage control. Worthington Construction is committed to inclusivity and regrets any missteps. But the internet was unforgiving, tearing the words apart. Too late, one user wrote. She showed who she is. News outlets ran with the story, their coverage relentless. Interviews with analysts predicting the firm's collapse, op-eds on the dangers of unchecked hubris. The boardroom's walls, once a fortress, now felt like a cage, trapping Penelope in the consequences of her actions. As the day wore on, the fallout spread. Employees whispered in break rooms, their loyalty shaken. Partners demanded emergency meetings, their voices sharp with worry. The board debated removing Penelope, their murmurs a death knell for her leadership. She sat isolated, her mind replaying the moment she turned away from Amara's outstretched hand. The world was watching, and there was no escape from the truth. Her empire was falling, and she had lit the match. The city's skyline shimmered under a twilight glow, its lights a constellation of ambition and resilience. In Imarania's downtown office, the air was still, the only sound the soft clack of her keyboard as she typed. Her desk, a fortress of purpose, was strewn with files on alternative firms, each a potential vessel for her $4 billion vision. The chaos engulfing Worthington Tower was a distant storm, its echoes reaching her only through muted notifications on her phone. Imara had no interest in the frenzy. She had made her move, withdrawing her funding with a single email, and now her focus was forward, not back. The energy project, her beacon of hope for underserved communities, would not die with Penelope Worthington's arrogance. Imara was charting a new course, one where respect was the currency of progress. She leaned back, her emerald green blazer draped over the chair, her eyes scanning a dossier on Horizon Renewables, a firm known for its inclusive ethos and community-driven projects. Imara had vetted them months ago, a contingency plan born of her instinct to always have an exit. Horizon's CEO, a woman named Lena Carter, had a reputation for listening to stakeholders, to communities, to the quiet voices often ignored. Imara's fingers paused over her phone, then dialed Lena's number. "We need to meet," she said, her voice calm but resolute, carrying the weight of possibility. Lena agreed without hesitation, her tone warm, a stark contrast to the cold dismissal Imara had faced at the brunch. The call ended, and Imara felt a spark of certainty. This was the path forward. Her office window framed the city, its pulse a reminder of the lives her investment could touch. The project's vision, solar farms lighting up rural schools, wind turbines powering small businesses, was too vital to be derailed by one woman's hubris. Imara opened a spreadsheet, her eyes tracing the numbers. $4 billion reallocated to Horizon would rebuild the project stronger, more equitable. She drafted a proposal, her words precise, outlining a partnership that prioritized community impact over corporate glory. Every line was a testament to her belief that power, when wielded with purpose, could transform. She sent the document to Lena, her cursor lingering on the send button, a quiet affirmation of her resolve. Across the city, Worthington Tower was a house of cards in collapse. Penelope's PR team churned out statements, each more desperate than the last, but the world had moved on. Social media, a relentless judge, had shifted its focus from outrage to curiosity about Imarania. Who is the woman in the green blazer? Posts multiplied, with users digging into her past, her Stanford PhD, her silent reshaping of industries. "She's the real power," one tweet declared, amassing thousands of likes. Imara, however, remained a shadow, declining interviews, her silence amplifying her mystique. She didn't need the spotlight. Her actions spoke louder than any headline. In a modest conference room at Horizon Renewables, Lena Carter gathered her team, and Imara's proposal was projected on a screen. The room buzzed with quiet excitement, the numbers staggering, but the vision clear. Clean energy for 3 states, with communities at the heart. Lena, her glasses perched on her nose, read Imara's words aloud, her voice steady. She wants equity, not just profit, Lena said, her team nodding. They knew Imara's reputation, her ability to make the impossible real. A young engineer raised her hand. Can we deliver this? She asked. Lena smiled. With her backing, we will. The team dove into planning, their energy a stark contrast to the panic at Worthington Tower. Imara's phone buzzed with a confirmation from Lena. We're in. Let's make this happen. She set the phone down, her gaze drifting to a photo of her grandmother on her desk, a woman who had taught her that true power was in lifting others. The project, reborn under Horizon, would honor that lesson. Imara envisioned children studying under reliable lights, families no longer fearing outages, and communities thriving. Her $4 billion was more than capital. It was a promise, one she would keep with a partner who valued respect as much as she did. The city's lights twinkled below, a canvas of hope. Imara stood, stretching her arms, her mind already mapping the next steps. Horizon's team was mobilizing, community leaders were being consulted, and the project was taking shape, free of Penelope's shadow. Imara's silence had toppled one empire and was now building another, not for glory, but for impact. She closed her laptop, the screen fading to black, and stepped to the window. The world beyond was alive, and so was her vision. The new direction was set, and Imara Nia, the silent force, was leading the way. The city skyline glowed under a velvet night, its lights a tapestry of dreams and resilience, mirroring the quiet triumph unfolding in Imara Nia's world. Her downtown office, a sanctuary of purpose, was bathed in the soft hum of progress. Papers lay neatly stacked on her desk, each a blueprint for the reborn $4 billion energy project now thriving under Horizon Renewables. The chaos of Worthington Tower, with its plummeting stocks and frantic boardroom, was a distant echo, irrelevant to the path Imara had forged. Her decision to withdraw her funding had toppled one empire, but her vision, clean energy for underserved communities, was rising stronger, a testament to her silent power. Imara sat at her desk, her emerald green blazer folded nearby, her eyes tracing a report from Horizon detailing the project's first milestones. Solar panels installed, community leaders engaged, hope rekindled. This was her legacy, and it was just beginning. Across the city, Penelope Worthington's world was a shadow of its former glory. Her name, once synonymous with prestige, now carried the weight of infamy. The viral footage of her snub, her curt, "Look, I don't have time for this," and the dismissive turn from Imara's outstretched hand had become a cautionary tale, dissected in boardrooms and classrooms alike. Social media, relentless in its memory, kept the Durchstand Chandra Worthington snub alive, with posts evolving from outrage to analysis. She didn't just lose a deal, one tweet read, she lost respect. Another declared, Imara Nia showed us who holds power. The world had learned Imara's name, not through her voice, but through her actions. Each move a masterstroke that reshaped the narrative. Imara, true to her nature, remained in the shadows. Her phone buzzed with interview requests from news outlets, their headlines clamoring for her story. The silent investor who toppled an empire. The black woman behind the $4 billion exit. She declined them all, her silence a deliberate choice. Fame was a distraction. Impact was her currency. She opened a letter from a community leader in one of the project's target states, a woman named Maria, who wrote of children studying under new solar-powered lights, their futures brighter because of Imara's vision. You gave us more than money, Maria wrote. You gave us dignity. Imara's eyes softened, the words echoing her grandmother's lessons. Power was not in the spotlight, but in the lives lifted. At Horizon Renewables, the project was gaining momentum. Lena Carter, the CEO, stood in a bustling office, her team poring over plans for wind turbines and grid expansions. A photo of Imara, taken at a recent meeting, hung on the wall. A rare moment of her in the open, her smile warm but guarded. Lena addressed her team, her voice steady. "This is Imara Nia's vision," she said, pointing to the photo. "She trusted us to make it real." The room nodded, their energy palpable. Engineers sketched designs, community liaisons shared feedback from rural leaders, and every step honored Imara's commitment to equity. The project was no longer just a deal. It was a movement, its roots deep in the communities it served. The city, ever watchful, carried Imara's story like a whispered legend. Business schools analyzed the snub as a case study in leadership failure, while activists hailed Imara as a symbol of resistance. A young black woman, inspired by the story, posted a video online, her voice fierce. Imara Nia didn't need to shout to be heard. She walked away, and that was enough. The video went viral, amassing millions of views, its message resonating with those who had been overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. Imara, unaware of the post, felt its ripple in the emails she received. Notes from students, entrepreneurs, and leaders thanking her for showing that power could wear a quiet face. Penelope's downfall, meanwhile, was complete. Worthington Construction, stripped of its cornerstone funding, faced a hostile takeover bid, its legacy reduced to a footnote. Penelope, once the darling of business magazines, was now a pariah, her apologies drowned out by the world's verdict. She sat in her office, the skyline mocking her through the windows, and replayed the brunch moment in her mind. The hand she had refused, the woman she had dismissed, these were the choices that had undone her. The board had sidelined her, and whispers of her resignation circulated, each one a nail in the coffin of her ambition. Imara stood at her office window, the city's lights a canvas of possibility. She thought of her grandmother whose stories of resilience had shaped her, and of the communities now empowered by her investment. The project's first phase was underway. Schools lit, businesses thriving, lives changed. Horizon's report showed progress beyond her expectations, each milestone a brick in her legacy. She didn't need the world to know her name. She needed it to feel her impact. Her silence had toppled arrogance and rebuilt hope, proving that the most powerful move was often the one unspoken. The city pulsed below, its rhythm a song of endurance. Imara closed her laptop, the screen fading to black, and stepped away from her desk. Her legacy was not in the headlines or the hashtags, but in the light that now shone in forgotten places. She had walked away from disrespect and walked toward transformation, her $4 billion a bridge to a better future. The world would tell her story, but Imara Nia, the silent force, was already writing the next chapter. What a journey Imara Nia's story has been, a testament to the power of silent strength and the consequences of disrespect. We hope this tale of resilience and retribution has sparked something in you. What do you think about Imara's bold move or Penelope's costly mistake? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know where you're watching from. Your insights fuel our stories. A huge thank you for joining us on this ride. Your support means the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales that challenge, inspire, and captivate. Hit that button, share your city, and let's keep the conversation going. We can't wait to meet you again in our next story. Until then, stay curious and keep demanding respect.